Bergson and the holographic theory. Today, we'll look at Chalmers again, his discussion of sentient AI, the fact that his hard problem seems to have been completely abandoned, turns out it was nothing, and the fact that he thinks consciousness is around the corner by at least 2032, say, for large language models. Quite interesting. In the past decade, clearly already by 2010, Chalmers has become the foremost philosophical exponent of this conception. AIs will be sentient and achieve general intelligence. It's always fun, I have to note, to watch Chalmers in his incisive mind lay things out. I think this is why he cemented this position. Along the way, his hard problem has been completely discarded, literally a non-factor. His framing of the problem, as I've noted, was, in my opinion, a misdirect and screwed up his understanding of the problem, hence the disposal of it. So we come to this talk, preceded by others along the same lines, in November of 2023. Could a large language model be conscious? There is an opening, shall we say, nod to his hard problem. He says, I use the terms consciousness as sentient, subjective experience. And a being is conscious if there is something it is like to be that being. So this is the standard, one of the standard framings of the hard problem, how to explain that there's something that it's like, which is almost a useless explanation, but anyhow. He goes on, consciousness excludes sensory experience, seeing red, feeling pain, thinking hard, deciding to act. All this would come under the term qualia, note. But he never returns to explain how his AI, or large language model architecture, in other words, just the computer, will account for such qualia. In other words, to his own hard problem. You're never going to see. That was the fundamental hard problem. How does an architecture account for qualia? Neural or otherwise, or computer. Quickly, he makes the statement. I think it is very important to distinguish consciousness from intelligence. Intelligence I understand roughly as behavior and reasoning that guides behavior, being able to do means ends of reasoning, to achieve multiple ends in many different environments, ultimately a matter of behavior. Then he says consciousness comes apart from that. Consciousness may be present in systems that are fairly low on an intelligence scale. There's a good chance that worms are conscious, fish are conscious. So the issue of consciousness isn't the same as the issue of human-level artificial general intelligence. So he knows that what consciousness is not. It's not equal to intelligence. It's not equal to goal-directed behavior. It's not equal to human-level intelligence. In other words, he's clearing the way for the acceptance of this concept. Intelligence does not require consciousness. This is a concept very agreeable to the AI world, because as they admit, they have no idea how to bring in consciousness into their so-called artificial intelligence. And it's a symptom of his failure to understand his own hard problem. As I've noted, the hard problem is more generally understood as the origin of the image of the external world. We've discussed this multiple times. I direct people to Bergson's solution. My number is 1R, 2R, and 3R, R for redone, where, again, briefly, Bergson's notion is of the universe as a holographic field, transforming indivisibly over time, not instant by instant. The brain serving as forming a reconstructive wave passing through the hologram that is the holographic field and being specific to a source within the field. The cup right where it says it is, external within the field. There's no images arising within the brain. The image is specified as an aspect of the holographic field, otherwise not imageable. Note, the image is dynamic. It is time extended, continuous, a continuous transformation of the external field. No current theory of short-term memory can solve this. It's time extension. Without an answer to this being, in reality, same difference, our experience. that is also known as our sentience. The image of the external world is, in fact, both our experience and our sentience of coffee stirring. So without this, there can be no grounded model of memory, how experience is stored in the brain, cognition, how experience is employed in thought, imagery, that is any role of a dynamic, continuously transforming imagery and thought. It is simultaneously a problem of the nature of time. And of course, time does not enter into any of Chalmers' thoughts or discussions on this subject. Continuous indivisible transformation. That's the problem. A series of discrete states, as in the Turing machine, as in the Turing definition of computation, state after state after state of that tape, on that tape, cannot support the perception of a continuous transformation. Our simple coffee stirring. AI and Chalmers have discarded the problem of the origin of the image of the external world. Their concept of cognition then wants and can have nothing to do with dynamic imagery. Thus, Chalmers and AI cannot entertain this. Cognition requires consciousness. There's cognition that employs dynamic transformation of imagery over an indivisible flow, not states of time, such that invariance can be perceived over the globality of the transformation. This I've noted many times is the essence of Penrose for his non-computational thought. Example here again, this visual proof of a computation does not stop the halting problem, where we're folding hexagonal numbers like 19 into a three-sided cube, and we're stacking that cube over the previous cube made by a previous stacking. So we get the cube 19 stacked over the 8, we get 27, which is a cubical number, on and on and on. This is a visual transformation that we can see in the human mind continues forever, this stacking. Or Wertheimer, listening to a conversation with a friend, an artist, to claim the sum of the angles of a polygon is always 360 degrees. And he's asking, well, how can that be true? Because a triangle is only 180. A square would be 360, etc. But so he's talking about, well, I was thinking how this can be true. And he has this initial intuition of a point surrounded by an angular space of 360 degrees. Then he thinks about, well, maybe you have this closed figure with the same angular space surrounding. And then phase 2, well, rather than a point, a line. And then how could I obtain a closed figure? Well, I start breaking the line. At the break, there's an angle, the delta. And then phase 3 of his intuitional thought, well, if I rotate that line around, I'll get a series of deltas. And when I collapse them all together, on the far right bottom there, the sum of the deltas is 360 degrees. And recently, Unzicker, in Unzicker's Real Physics channel. And he's contemplating, well, how is AI going to do something like envision a field of numbers, the concept of a field of numbers? Or in other words, another way to look at it is, how would it come up with the concept of a mathematical group with an inverse operation, closed property, etc., the properties that make a group? Or the intuitive rotation property of the field of complex numbers, or quaternion multiplication with its screw or twist. Notice that's a picture from 3 Blue 1 Brown's channel, who's always throwing these concepts into their underlying visual transformation. In other words, this is just variants of the same problem of Penrose. AI, with Chalmers encouraging it, is conveniently immune to all of this. This pretty much sums up his state of mind, Chalmers. Some argue that consciousness is going to give you all these amazing capacities. Consciousness will let systems do things that other systems can't do. That may be true, but right now we understand the function of consciousness sufficiently badly. There's nothing I can promise you that conscious systems can do that non-conscious systems cannot. No difference that he can see between conscious and unconscious systems. Now, I like to say, well, who's we, Kimosabe? Yes, we, if you utterly ignore Bergson, Gibson, McGilchrist, etc. So we come to an evaluation of features, X's, that people think are critical to their being sentience in the large language models. If large language models lack X. So some of the X's: biology, senses as embodiment, world models, self models, recurrent processing, global workspace, unified agency. So we go through them one by one. Biology, summarily dismissed. A really familiar issue in philosophy, he says. It goes back to Searle in the Chinese room. I'm really more interested in things more specific to the large language models. So I'll pass over this quickly, as though somehow biology has no relation to understanding language. But if to account for the image of the external world, that pesky problem so resolutely ignored now, if the brain has to form a concrete reconstructive wave, as Bergson argues, then the biology of the brain is all important, isn't it? And if the biochemistry underlying this wave specifies, or say imposes, a scale of time upon the perceived external field, and as I've argued, LSD acting as a cardinal absorbent via electronic induction on the 5-HT2A receptor raises the frequency of the vibrating mass of neurons so that the fly's wings slow, the coffee swirls would slow, conversation would slow. In other words, you're having a change in the specified perception of the world. Well, then, again, the biology of the brain is all important because that's underlying our very sentience, the form of our sentience and experience of the external world. So this is to say experience, the quality of our senses is modulated by the biochemical dynamics of the brain. I would think that's pretty important. And this is just the very beginning of the biochemical story. Merest beginning. Currently, over 5,000 receptor types have been identified. Note my number 85 on clock and cell types. I mean, the 5-H2A does not account for the effects of DMT or psilocybin or multiple other, tons of other effects that are going to be functions of the biology. You can't just put your head in the hole on this. Number 2, senses and embodiment. So he notes LLMs have no sensory processing, so they can't sense. They have no body, so they can't act. So they have no sensory and agentive consciousness, and perhaps no genuine meaning or cognition or symbol grounding. But this too is dismissed. He says, but look at all the extensions to LLMs that actually have some sensory processing. For example, GPT-4 is already designed to process images. And he shows this picture with the cat and the dog, and the vision encoder is feeding into an LLM to understand a sentence like a very serious cat. You might say, what about the body? He goes on. But people are also designing these models with bodies now, where a language model controls a physical robot. So a picture of the SACAM project where GPT-3 is driving the robot. Ask it via the GPT-3, I spilled my drink, can you help? And this drives the action to pick up the banana or the apple. So he says, so it will be quite standard to have extended LLMs with senses and embodiment. This would take care of that criticism. So one wonders, what happened to qualia? Worse, how is this architecture solving the origin of the image of the external world? Worse, perception is virtual action. Back to Bergson's framework for a moment. The brain is a reconstructive wave through the holographic field. But the body's action capability is the selection principle from the vast information in the holographic field, otherwise unimageable, say, by the reconstructive wave process. We are seeing how we can act, virtual action. If a different scale of time is specified, for example, by LSD, it shows that we can reach out slowly, grasp the fly by the wing. The perception is correlated with a possible action. Thus, perception, the image of the external world, is intricately bound to the body's biological action capability. and the specified scale of time. It's all of a piece. An extended LLM architecture has nothing to do with this. It has zero possibility of reflecting this principle of the image as virtual action. You will not find the qualitative image, our experience, our sentience of the wing flapping fly or the stirring coffee cup reflecting our possible action at a scale of time within the weight vectors of an LLM or the image pixel groups it is interacting with, or in the bit patterns changing beneath this conceptual level. I do not know how Chalmers thinks that he solved this problem. But in other words, they, to include Chalmers, yet have little concept as to what embodiment actually means. World model. Lack this X. I think world models are the critical piece here, for world models are considered required for consciousness. Bender et al., they're saying large language models are stochastic parrots. They just minimize text prediction error. They don't have genuine understanding or world models. He notes that people are searching for world models in large language models, and he notes a case where they found what looks like a world model of a game board in large language models and thus dismissed. Now, I could truly care less about world models. The first question is if experience is stored in the brain, and they have no clue. I mean, the people who think world models are critical to consciousness can't even begin to explain how you see the coffee cup in the first place. Number 4, recurrent processing, another X that they might lack. He says many theories of consciousness, like integrated information theory, recurrent processing theory, say it's required for consciousness. And then he shows things like LSTM networks, and then things that look vaguely like that on the right side there in the GPT architecture. And dismissed. But note, a recurrent network is just more syntax, more discrete states. It's still built on the fundamental Turing architecture. It has nothing to do with the indivisible flow of time. The idea that recurrence is critical to consciousness, quote unquote, is a complete failure to grasp the problem of time. Number 5, global workspace. Chalmers says, it's not obvious that many large language models have these. On the other hand, it seems that the extensions do have something like a global workspace. And he shows a picture of a global workspace. Note the perceiver workspace where apparently everything's put together. That is to say, somewhere in the perceiver workspace is the coffee cup and the stirring spoon. And one wonders, is this a mental space, a perceptual space, as Yoshua Bach would call it? Just what is this? Because, again, we've got neurochemical flows. At best, bits changing bit patterns. How do we get the coffee cup in that perceiver workspace? Interesting question. But Chalmers goes on and says, noting these kinds of workspaces, once you start integrating his images, the dog and the cat, which is nothing but correlated bit patterns, with the robot's action capabilities, with auditory information, etc., you'll have something equivalent to a global workspace. Hence, dismissed. But global workspace theory is not a model of consciousness. As I've kind of just noted, the origin of the image of the external world, also our experience, that is our sentience, there's no solution in this theory. There's zero recognition of the problem of time. There's no registration whatsoever of Gibson's laws of invariance. That is, that the invariance of an event structure, that is, the invariance of structure in the event, are coordinate across modalities. Show that coffee stirring again. All the invariants that structure it, velocity flow fields, adiabatic ratios, oscillation, energy of oscillation, the frequency of oscillation, inertial tensors for the momenta of the spoon, acoustical invariance as that spoon clicks against the side of the cup. These invariance, this kinesthetic, the visual, the acoustical, are all coordinate. They are intrinsically bound. The clinking against the side of the cup, coordinate with the adiabatic ratio, the periodic frequency. So they're intrinsically bound within the resonating neural mass of Gibson that supports that reconstructive way specifying the coffee cup. There's no global workspace needed. So 6, unified agency. Chalmers says, if you ask me, the features that LLMs lack is a unified agency. He notes they can take on many personas like actors or chameleons. They lack stable goals and beliefs. So maybe they're not really unified agents. Consciousness seems to require more unity. But, he says, there are efforts to train these systems after a certain individual. There are efforts to build these systems from the ground up as an individual. That's certainly coming. We have some reason to think those systems will be more unified. Thus, dismissed. I'd simply ask, how do you have a continuous sense of self when you cannot begin to explain the continuity of the experience of coffee stirring? This is beyond me. Last thought. I think this is just amazing. How generally accepted this AI, quote, AI is or will be sentient and will have AGI, general intelligence, belief has become. How the hard problem has been totally abandoned because never understood. How Bergson is resolutely ignored. How Gibson ecological psychology is resolutely ignored. In any case, Chalmers' closing comment. There's a reasonable chance by 20%, say 20%, we'll have conscious AI by 2032. Doesn't have to be human level AGI, but say mouse level capacities within a decade. So, well, speaking of mice consciousness, let's ask our expert, Mr. Rat, about this. Here's what he has to say. I fear it's safe to say the claim must be dismissed. So, for a far fuller, all-in-one-place exposition of these arguments, if you haven't seen it, take a look at this book. So next, we'll see. Till then, signing off.